Hey everyone, before we get started, I want to tell you about our upcoming WrenchWay Roundtable that is going to be talking about why shops need to focus on technician career development. And we're going to be doing this roundtable on February 24th at 7 p.m. Central Time. We've got an outstanding panel to talk about career development, and that panel includes Tim Winkler from VIP Tires and Service, Jim Bennett from ATI, Jake Schaefer from Smart Motors Toyota, and Damon Augustino from 6th Street Automotive. We've had all of these guests on our podcast, and they are all great and bring a really, really high level of expertise to this conversation. Join us on February 24th. We think it's going to be really popular, just like the one we had in January, and look forward to seeing you.
Beyond the Wrench with Jay Goninen from Find a Wrench.
Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Wrench. Today, I am excited to welcome Jim Bennett from CarMasters and newly from ATI, Automotive Training Institute. Welcome, Jim. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Jay.
Good. I'm excited to get you on. You're a ball of knowledge. You've got a ton of experience and just a lot of insight into a lot of things that are really relevant to technicians all over the place. So I want to start off similar to what we do with other episodes with having you talk about how you got to where you're at today. Like what was it that your experience that led you into the automotive world?
Well, my father was a employee of Ford Motor Company, Chicago Assembly. I grew up in the Midwest, outside of Chicago, then southwestern Michigan. We also had a body shop and a mechanical shop at home, and my dad worked on dragster race engines for a local marathon station in Park Forest, Illinois. So, as a toddler, I seen a rail light up and go down the street in a residential area. That was kind of, good memories. So my neighbor, when we moved to the country, my neighbor also had a owner-operator fleet of semis. And before as a young teenager, just 13, 14, I was starting to do preventive maintenance on the semis. And he was teaching me how to drive and move around the yard. And I wanted more and more and more. And I was in a rural area in Michigan. There wasn't a lot there. I joined the Navy straight out of high school when I was 17. I went to the construction mechanic school in the Navy in the Seabees down in Gulfport, Mississippi. That was a reserve program. I got that, went back home and did even more work at home, working on cars and trucks. And then I decided I went active duty Navy from the reserve program. The construction mechanic that I loved was overmanned, so I went to the fleet as an engineman, where I worked on little outboard gasoline engines, huge propulsion diesels, auxiliaries, and even gas turbine jet engines. Part of the career path there, where I volunteered to stay at sea and did special projects, I had more engineering experience on different platforms than most. When they finally told me, you got to go to shore duty sooner or later, after I passed it up twice, I chose instructor duty. I got certified and trained in their San Diego Community College program with the Navy and Great Lakes, become an instructor. And then because of the expertise in the fleet and having 4 different propulsion platforms under my belt and auxiliaries, they had me become a curriculum developer, which is normally a second tour master training specialist instructor. I wrote 2 courses, a basic engineman school and an advanced school, that both got college accredited. Then I moved into the new technology department, where I helped develop with 2 other instructors a brand new course to teach junior enlisted and senior officers how to develop animated computer-based curriculum. I had already developed a couple of those lessons myself. Then when that course finished, I became the database programmer for all the learning resource centers data, and wrote code for a couple of years.
Really?
So yes, the Navy replaced me with 2 data processors. They had to create 2 new billets to replace an engineman chief. So that was interesting, but there's so much life experience. I was with such great mentors between technology and leadership and working out of my rate and in the rate at the same time. I still use that information today and it made it a lot easier to understand coding and flashing in vehicles and different networks. Then in 1996, while I was still active Navy, I retired in 2002. I seen a flyer where Navy campus, their educational program, was paying for ASE testing. And they were some of the construction mechanic and the engine rating were both source rates where you could take all the mechanical ASE tests you wanted. So I started doing a little bit of studying and taking tests. I wasn't too many years that 4 years before I retired in 1998, I opened a brand new CarMasters Automotive, which will be 23 years now in this June of 2021 that it will have been open. I had for years 22, 23 certifications. And one day I was also getting contracted as a claims investigator for arbitration, some extent of warranty, and testifying in court as an expert. I happened into a GM dealer over in the Hampton, Newport News area of Virginia, and I seen this world-class technician badge on this technician that was getting ready to require it. I'm like, what's that? Because I'd never heard of that, and I'd been in the program for years. And that's when he said, well, you need 22 certs. I said, well, I've got more than that. And he said, oh, but you got to have, there's certain certs. You got to have master automotive truck and collision, which I also owned a body shop, and L1 and L2. And you get to be what they call a world-class technician, which is a combined Auto Care Association ASE award. So I took a couple more tests. I now have 29 certs.
Wow.
So I've been the world-class for years, which is a pretty small group. When I got my letter a couple years ago, several years back from the Auto Care Association, they said there had been less than 2,030 years, and I think it's still below 2,000 currently that have achieved that.
Wow.
And having been with, I had another trainer that was helping coach myself and some other shops in the Norfolk area that was from Canada, and from being in the Navy with leadership training and training my crew, and having been an instructor, I knew how important it is to have a second set of eyes, continued education, and as well as we first trained the trainer, which we now call for technicians mentors. The importance of that, when that training group went away, ATI happened to come in and did what they called a boot camp, and I went to that, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is exactly like where I was, but to the next level. I signed my shop up with ATI program to get coached and have myself as an owner coached and my service providers trained and coached back in February of 2009. So I've been with ATI for some time. ATI is forever listening to their clients and continues every year to up their game, up what they do for their clients, to help them to improve their success and their abilities. They've now added technician training. So I'm in the process, and I've already added quite a few tools since I started in January 11th. There's a full set of diagnostic surveys. We have a self-assessment. We have some tests for assessment, and I'm still working on more as we go, as well as some formal lessons. One of the things we're doing, having been in the industry for so long, myself and my shop is also MAP certified for Motors Assurance Program, and having been in the ASE qualification pipeline, I'm also, from being with ATI, exposed to AMI. So I'm accredited Master Automotive Manager. So our curriculum that we develop as a team at ATI is going to check all those boxes where it'll meet AMI's requirements, Motors Assurance Program terminology for uniform and consistency. The goal is to have it ASE case certified, as well as when we meet and exceed all that, it'll clearly be Department of Labor certified for an apprenticeship program.
Man, that's a lot to unpack. That is one. I think your experience is so unique in that you've been in it all your life, but then two, it is interesting on how much focus you put on the education side, right? And how much you put on trying to make sure that you're putting kind of your best self out there. One thing I want to ask you that's kind of a little bit off topic before we get into our topic of the day is what advice would you give to maybe a young technician that is going in to take those ASE tests and going to, or, whatever exam it is, some certification test? I know there's a lot of technicians I talk to that get really, really nervous about that. Is there any good advice on maybe a mental approach of how you go after those tests?
I've been fortunate where I've been able to remember a lot of what I've done, and it's helped me with testing. But even in the Navy, I learned more and was more successful, the same as with automotive technician, by doing than reading a study book. But I'll also want to back up. I don't want to devalue any study books or courses, because there's a few things that where most of the ASE stuff I was close to acing or did very well when I took the test. There was a couple areas that you don't do all the time, or that are done at different levels that, I might have passed, I think, collision estimator the first time by 1 point. But then when I seen a few questions on a couple things I didn't do on a regular basis, even though I owned a body shop and I wrote estimates, but I hadn't used every system out there or been exposed to every possible combination of conditions.
Right.
I remember the questions I didn't know, and I went back and studied them. So next time it wouldn't be, passing by 1. So anytime I took a test and there was something I didn't know, I remembered, I'm going to go back and do some homework here, and I'm going to get better. As well as different, depending on, that's why it's so important, and so probably the worst thing that I see on an ongoing basis that you deal with is technicians, service advisors, or owners too busy to help themselves. And it's a shame that because, one of the things that everybody's got their sayings, the ones I hear a lot, keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. We all know that's referred to as a definition of insanity. If your lead tech is so short and he's a true valued asset and a team player, if he doesn't make some time to be a mentor, you're going to forever be shorthanded, as well as that technician starts getting older, he's physically going to be, or she, able to do less. I've seen a lot more she's that are doing a great job too.
Yes,
so we want to include that.
100%.
So that's if you get ahead of that, that's part of one of our first steps, as well as with AMI will be, shop foreman and train the trainer, get the mentor certified, get the mentor trained, as well as there's different personality tests, and not all of us get along sometimes.
Yeah.
Even though we're all great people, we all have potential. So that's part of the same thing with a service advisor, that you can do a Wonderlic test. There's PXT does testing. There's some other testing that ATI has, where you can try to kind of figure out what personalities people are and pair up the ones that'll be most likely show success and compatible, most likely be compatible. So, just like on sales, some people are drivers or motivators. They're both great. They both do their job well. But so there's a lot more than just, hey, work with him or help him or help her or whatever.
Yeah. So the interesting part about this to me is that's really something ATI introduced me to, because when I thought about Wonderlic testing in the past, I always thought like NFL quarterbacks, or, like in the draft, they would take the Wonderlic test, and I didn't know much about it, but explain to me what that is. Like, what is the Wonderlic test?
It's a comprehensive personality profile. And what they do in a nutshell is a very in-depth examination of people that have done that skill set, that job, that were successful. And they develop testing to try to predict, and they're fairly accurate. I can go into later if you want to hear, but where I've used them for service writers, and you want to ignore it, you shouldn't. But it isn't an acid test. There's some people, just like they're told they could never be, that may not have scored well on a Wonderlic, but wound up being a great quarterback. But they had to work a lot harder. It didn't come natural. So this helps to, identify strengths and weaknesses. And even then, just like the example I gave, where some people may not score in a sales world, a driver motivator. and those are both normally successful for sales, but they have different skill sets and different, strengths that you want to have that person in the appropriate job related to their strengths. And then you want to try to coach and instruct and build them on the weaknesses to try to help make them well-rounded.
Oh, I love this stuff because I think it's so important and something, on the technician side that a lot of times it's easy to gloss over, or even on the service writer side or service advisor side, is the personality side. And you and I have talked about this in the past, but I've talked about this with a lot of people, and we end up kind of behind the eight ball a little bit, and have to hire the next person that comes in the door because we're so desperate to find somebody, right? And I think that's where, as shops, the evolution of shops continues, to me, that's such an undervalued thing, is that personality, that alignment of personalities, and making sure that this manager works with this technician well. And granted, we're all going to have bad days, but there's so much value in that, in finding those people that work well together, because you're just going to have a stronger team as a result, right?
Well, exactly. And there's so much more involved than what people realize. As a shop owner, when I was trying to find a technician, there'd be such a huge volume of applicants. I didn't have enough time to go through every one like I wish I had. So that's where sometimes you need some assistance with some different, teams out there that you can hire or contract to help you dwindle that down. But if you don't know what to do with them once you're given an eligible candidate that has, screened of having potential, that's where you kind of need both. You need some help in your screening and identifying, and then you need to know what's best practices, I like to call, where some of the Wonderlics, the PSTs, and there's other personality profile tests. Some of those tests are free that you can do, that ATI provides. Some of them there's a fee with, no matter, where you go through ATI or whoever, right. But they all have value. And if you don't know the personalities and strengths and weaknesses, then you may be setting them, the new candidate, and yourself up for failure, when they may have had a successful opportunity if it was applied differently, or with a different mentor, or even possibly in a different position in your same organization that you didn't know they were great at, that you may not need that moment, or you might be hiring for more than one. There's been times when somebody applied for a tech, but they scored well as an advisor.
To me, so I worked for a company at one point where we had to take the DISC assessment, right? And I think once you take one of those kind of personality assessments, I think you even learn a little bit about yourself, right? And I think we all have an idea of what we're good at, maybe what we're not so good at. But it was so weird to take this test and then get the report back and be like, yeah, they nailed me. Like, they're everything on this thing was like spot on.
They give an example. The Wonderlic test for sales has 88 questions, real versus ideal. Gives you a 37-page assessment about what makes you tick. And majority of people are just like what you said. They look at it, wow, that is me, and I didn't realize that. Now, there's a few that don't like the results, that are in denial, but that's another story.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and even that, it's like, that's the coaching side too, of trying to bring them up to understand, it's okay to have weaknesses. It's okay to do that, that if you fall short in this area, let's try to figure out ways that we can help grow you. And maybe sometimes it's just not going to work out. That's just not a fit whatsoever, but there are lots of opportunities to kind of start that conversation based on that paper. So I appreciate you kind of diving into the Wonderlic a little bit, because I think it's so valuable, and it's a tool that not everybody uses, and something that I think could have a positive impact on a lot of people. So now I think that segues really, really nicely into our next topic, and really the topic of the day that we're going to talk about, which is career pathing, and being able to kind of paint that picture of what a tech's career is going to look like with you. And you've done a lot of research, a lot of work, and with your new role at ATI, you're diving headfirst into this. Talk to me a little bit about career paths, why it's important, why there's, why we should even have this conversation.
The automotive field has a lot of potential, and at the same token, there's a lot of technicians the next decade are going to be aging out. It's becoming more and more technical, and as well as with the right organization and the right skill set, it could be very lucrative. So it's a good career that's not going to go away. The demand is going to be there, and it's going to be ever increasing. So to be able to capitalize on that, and it's just like you said, a career path where the best candidate, the most successful that I've seen, are getting some type of formal education, whether it be some classroom, some online self-study, but even the formal training trade schools and colleges want that individual to do an internship or some hands-on in a shop so they can apply that and see more than just in a classroom or on a video screen. So when you combine those different learning medias of seeing, hearing, and doing, that's when you're going to have the best potential to retain and then later on apply that.
That's great. Yeah.
Well, and I've got to give you just in my shop alone, my senior foreman, team leader, manager out in the shop, a guy named Chuck, he came to me in 2001 as somebody else's helper. Now he's moved all the way up through the ranks in mine to become a senior tech and then a team leader. Then ultimately he's my senior manager in the shop.
Oh, love it.
Now, 2 years ago, one of his sons, he had 2 sons, his youngest son came in as an apprentice without having gone through school. We put him into a training program, and he has since then, he just passed an ASE test today.
All right.
About 8-9 months ago, he became a licensed Virginia State Police Safety Inspector, which you have to have a minimum of 1 year experience for. So he is progressing up on his amount of billable flat rate hours. Like we all know what those are. Those are steadily going up. His skill level's increasing, and so is his pay, and not to mention his satisfaction.
Oh, I love that, because you see that evolution, and you see. I think what I love about your approach here, Jim, is you didn't bring him in, and I see this too often with shops, right? They'll bring that young person in, and they're expecting him to produce in like a month, and it's just unrealistic, isn't it?
Exactly. What I've got a saying, and a lot of people have heard me say, and it started out where I had multiple sales reps from different parts stores come in, and they see me signing up we're a Napa Auto Care. We used to be a TechNet, but I've gone and even as a Napa Auto Care signed up for all the Napa classes as well as from other parts stores, paid for those classes. And if there's any one-off specialty training, get the appropriate technicians that haven't been to that in addition to do my own training in-house. And I've had those reps ask me, why do you spend so much on training? What if they leave and you spend all that much on training and they go to a competitor? And my answer to them was pretty simple. It was like, what if I don't and they stay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're not evolving your shop at all then.
Yeah. What if I don't train them and they stay? Then what do I have? What if what I have invested nothing in them? Their capability is going to be a fraction of what it could be to help myself, my customers, whether it be the front counter on jobs they sell or the technicians in the back. My goal is to try to do everything so it's good for the company, good for the staff, and good for the customer at the same time.
I love that. I really, really like that. And I think if nothing lands home out of this podcast with people other than that, I would be happy, because I think that is such an important piece. And I think a lot of people talk about growing their own and talk about doing they talk a big game when it comes to this. This is execution of that. And I think that is such a big piece that we miss out on, is that execution side. And it can be really easy to say, hey, we're booked out, 2 weeks in the shop. We don't have time for this training. Let's not do this. And I give ATI a lot of credit in that regard, because they've, in working with my dad's shop, they've changed my mind on that, right? Like, I was so used to, like, pack the cars and let's go, let's get as much out as we can. And to kind of have that, manage your car count, do it the right way, get the training in order. Like, there's just such a better, more methodical approach that I think you take, and a lot of really, really great shops take. And I applaud you for it, but then two, that leads into that career pathing, right? Like, so if you're laying out the career path, you kind of have a map as to what training they need, don't you?
Well, exactly. And that's a combination of setting their goals, letting them know, hey, in 1 year or year and a half, we expect you to get from that GS knows nothing, training on all the safety, train the basic stuff, and we'll get you to become the safety inspector with the state police. So they require minimum 1 year. And then within 2 years, we're going to get you your first ASE and more ASEs after that, and keep working, giving them the goals of, basically, if you look in almost any of the reference, Pro Demand or All Data, they all Motors, Children's, no matter what you use, they all assign a D, a C, a B, and A skill level technicians, and give them a career path where they can go from that, no training, coming in the door green, to safely working on cars and being that D Tech, C Tech, B Tech, and also kind of giving them an example of what the responsibilities and pay, everything with it, so they've got goals, and it's also really good if your manager, your shop owner, not only knows your professional goals, what's your personal goals? How many of us have friends or people that we grew up with or in other businesses that may own or know somebody that can help your team member with their personal goal? Wow. That you can refer to, and follow up. I mean, it's just part of caring and taking care of their career path and helping them along. Before I started asking those questions, and there again, ATI helped me to open my eyes to that years ago, where there's many things that even some of our team outings that we do have changed, knowing what everybody likes to do, and we kind of mix it up. So
that is fascinating to me. And so walk me through when you hire that new person on, say it's a green technician, no experience other than maybe they worked at a Jiffy Lube or something like that. Say they come on, what is like the first step you take with them? Do you sit down and walk through that training plan with them right away, or do you have them shadow somebody at first, or like, how does that work?
Well, there again, it depends on their age and their skill level, what they've got. Ideally, it's best if you could get somebody that's still in high school and getting ready to graduate, and you want to include their parents.
Love it.
So that way their parents, especially when you have a really professional organization and you've got a lot of diagnostic and specialty equipment, to where they can see the environment that their son will be in or daughter will be in. There's a stigma on a lot of people that don't exactly think of a mechanic, as being a technically professional, career. So some parents may not support that because they don't know any better.
Yeah.
So it's opening the eyes of what's possible to both, so you get the buy-in from both. But then you got to practice what you preach as well. That's where it's good to, if you've got people in the shop that you can show that have gone from a helper to the shop manager, that's ideally, for as far as a business owner, or many technicians open their own business, started out and they've worked their way up. For your business, it should be able to work and run without you.
Yes.
You should be able to work on your business, not work as an employee in the business. That way you can help all areas of the business success and grow.
Yeah.
And then if there is one of your key individuals is temporary out, then you may need to once in a while be an employee in your business, but that should be the exception, not the norm, to help them get through whatever they need.
Well, and
But
I think that's where that career, like, that's the stuff when I think when we clarify what working on your business rather than working in your business is, that's what we're talking about, right? Is laying out a career path for your team, you know, having those individual conversations with them so you know what their personal goals are, so you know what their professional desires are. Because a lot of times I think, you know, I was guilty of this, is you put a tech in the shop and then you just think they're happy, right? You don't, you don't have that personal connection, or don't make it intentional to have that personal connection. And when you lose that, you kind of lose that personal feeling, and you don't know where they want to be at. And to me, that impacts their career path, that impacts everything. And honestly, I think from a technician's shoes or any employee's shoes, people struggle with that, because if they don't think you care, there's no loyalty there.
Well, and that's a great point. And you don't need to be telling them you care. You need to be showing them you care.
Yes.
You know, because there's no other way around that. You know, because you got to practice what you preach. You got to back up your actions, your words with actions, and they need to be able to come to you if they have a suggestion or there's an issue. Now, I really like it when they come to me with a solution.
Yes.
You know, but I mean, everything, even from, like, everybody knows what a multi-point or a courtesy check or a wellness or a health check, whatever you want to call it. One of the concepts there is where you get your team together, and even though we know there's these so many points that we need to check, let's, from all your experience, what works best for you from the inside out, let's put this in the order that you want. Kind of do a clinic, if you want to call that, courtesy check clinic, and let's make this, work for you to make it easy and flow for you. So even though everything's getting checked that needs to be checked, there's so many things you can do, even how you outfit and equip your shop of what goes where can save steps, save times, make it easier. So it just so much of a team concept, from the training to the production, to the everyday environment. One of the things that I've encouraged the technicians to do, which again, I've learned this from ATI with the service advisors. You go to their service advisor school, you have a goal poster, you have professional and personal. And if the technician wants to share that, which I encourage that's when you can try to help follow, see how they're doing with their goals. And at times again, if you know somebody from another field or whatever that can help them, we recently helped the service advisor get a house because know somebody that was in the real estate, and it kind of greased the wheel and helped them out. There's all different ways. And sometimes it, costs you nothing but a few minutes. Sometimes you can contribute to their goal for a good person,
man,
to help them out, because think about all the different, hopefully you had some breaks or a mentor or somebody which I was blessed. I had some really good ones in the Navy, and then with some incredible coaches at ATI.
Yeah. I still, it's funny because one of my early mentors, his name was Charlie Barco, and he worked with me at Diesel Injection Service when I was first kind of getting my feet underneath me. And he had passed away a couple of years ago. And right after he passed away, I was going through some things and found his old business card. And I actually have that framed in my office now. And I think it's so true in looking back through my career progression. I'm sure you said the same thing with you, is the need for that mentorship and that need to even ask, what we think might be a silly question now. When I was 22 years old and trying to find a real estate agent, you don't know a lot of people, or you don't know a lot of professional people. And in fact, there's still a lot of them still in school at that point. So, I think that just that alone shows that you care. And I think in that career progression step, something that you've talked a lot about is that mentorship side, right? And how are we, we lay out the plan, we lay out the training with that person, and then we want to see them succeed, right? And so we assign them a mentor, or as you mentioned, like it used to be train the trainer and then it kind of shifted over. What is it that you find in a good mentor? Is it only diagnostic skill? Is it personal skill, like management type skills? Like, what do you look for when you're looking at a mentor?
Well, that's where it's not just diagnostic. We'll clear that up right now.
Yeah.
I don't know how many, just give you something, any tech down here will know that's been in the professionally trained. How many junior guys that came that weren't professionally trained, that didn't have a good mentor and hadn't been through a proper training path, that brand new rotors, they're using brake clean to get the corrosion protection off of them, when we all know that's not what the brake pads are supposed to go on. You know, nice soap and water, clean them up and let them dry, not a solvent.
Yes.
So just the little things though, like that, is part of, from A to Z. Don't assume they were trained properly. I mean, that doesn't mean you micromanage them, but that means you be there and you guide them. And for years I had started on my own, where my team leaders, which were the mentors, they got compensated off every hour somebody on their team trained. Now, as you get an apprentice one-on-one with somebody getting older, then you kind of up that to a higher level where they get, you know, they're and it depends on the shop and the organization and how much training and mentoring, but to where that can extend the productivity of that older technician while mentoring and training and giving a career path for somebody brand new can make them both productive longer.
Well, and you help your quality control, you help the education of that young technician. And I think that is so, oftentimes I think, especially with the baby boomers right now, we let them go out the door with just a load of knowledge and just say, you physically can't do it anymore. You know, here's your parting gift. Thanks for your 30 years here. Again, I think that's an extension of showing that you care even about that veteran technician and how you treat that veteran technician. That young technician is looking at that side too, right? Like they're looking to see, you know, okay, are they treating Randy right? Because Randy's put his heart and soul into this business. And if they don't treat him right as he's going out the door, why should I stick around for any extended period of time? Because they obviously don't care about that person.
I had this past Christmas, I had a grown man, a technician that had come from another shop, that it had been here less than a month. When he got a Christmas card, he was like, couldn't believe it, overwhelmed, like, wow, nobody's ever done that. And then when he opened it and he had a bonus and he hadn't been here that long, he's like, it was in further disbelief. You know, so that, and it doesn't have to always be money. If they've contributed to your team and helped contribute to your success, then I like sharing the wealth and showing them I appreciate them. But it's not just that. It's the different team outings we do, whether it be, you know, I also own some stock cars that race out at a local home track at Langley Speedway and some other tracks, where I've had my crew go out to the races, be in the pits. A couple of them have raced some cars I've owned.
Wow.
So it's a variety of, they like bowling. We've done bowling nights. Being retired military, I'm an active shooter, so some of them love going out and shooting. So it's a combination of what they like, you know, and if it's something you like too, that's even a home run there. But even if it's not, you can expand your own horizons.
Yeah.
You know, but working together as a team and the different team building, you know, events. I mean, I've had a couple of shop owners said, "Well, I would never go into a gun range and give everyone that worked for me a loaded gun." I'm like, well, maybe you don't have the right culture there. You know, maybe your screening wasn't quite as good as it should be. I mean, I'm trusting them to work on my company vehicles and my customers' brakes. I'll just leave that one there, you know.
There might be other core issues at that shop that you need to address.
That's kind of what I'm saying. You know, we'll just leave that one alone. But yeah, you know, I really truly appreciate, you know, everyone on my team.
Yeah.
And if they're having a bad day, it isn't you did this wrong. It's, you know, we just like whether it be a technician or whatever, we'll look at, hey, what opportunity do we have to do it better? Not this is what you did wrong. and sometimes I've had a different people point things out that I hadn't thought about, that, wow, a different young set of eyes perspective, and we improved our process. So that's value, and you need to value at every level.
Yeah. And I want to extend this part of the conversation a little bit more, because in my experience, and this is something I've advised, a lot of shops on that just are friends, nothing too crazy, but I've had, maybe a shop owner or a manager come in and say, hey, you know what, this tech has worked for me for, 8 years, was good. He's hit a rough patch now. I think I got to let him go. And to me, I'd be curious to hear your take on this side of it, because a lot of times what I've said is, I think you need to go deeper into this conversation rather than just letting that person go. And especially if you have some level of relationship, but to sit down with them and say, okay, hey, what's going on? There's got to be something in your personal life that's impacting what's happening in your daily life here. What is it? And can I help? Is there, do you see something similar with other shops, or is it more me seeing that?
No, I've had times when somebody became a single parent and you didn't know that, or they had a parent that moved in with them, and regardless, their schedule changed because they were a caregiver, whether it be somebody older or younger, and they didn't want to burden you, which is a shame. They should never feel that way.
Right.
And sometimes it could be as simple as changing their schedule, shifting it a few hours one way or the other way, and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
It could be that I've actually seen sometimes when somebody changed their hours where they want less hours, but they took care of their family, and when they were there, they were more productive. So they worked less hours, but got more done than they were doing before because they were run ragged. So, if they've given their year in, year out, their time to you, then, you are obligated, at least I believe you are, to try to do the best for them if they're trying to do the best for you.
Yeah.
That's one thing I've always said, I try to have high standards. We're Napa Gold Shop, ASE Blue Seal certified, Repair Pail Top Shop, and other, different, programs we're in and approved.
Shop. Yeah.
And so I like to have high standards, but I also like to reward them. But at the same token, if there is something that you've done what I've asked you to do and it doesn't go right, I'm going to own it. And then let's work together to make this better and improve our process. So that whether that be professional or personal, it applies. Most relationships I've learned fail, whether it's personal or business, because of lack of or improper communication.
Boy, isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? And those conversations specifically, that's somebody's life, and they're, especially if they've been loyal to you for, say, that 8 years, and then I think that's a great opportunity. And this is the way I look at it, is that's a great opportunity to create more loyalty, is if you could work with them through a rough patch and help them get back on their feet again. That is so impactful.
It's funny you say that because that brings back a memory. When I hadn't retired from the Navy yet. I was my first 2 or 3 years in owning a business, and there was an older gentleman that had started to build a relationship that was bringing his vehicles in, and he was starting to bring some family members and friends in, and he had shared with me that he was a retired business consultant. Early, after about the first year or so. So one day I'm at the counter, and I'm, which early days you're the technician, the service advisor, and the the owner, all the above. But I'm at the counter. I've got a couple employees now, and he asked me. He says, why I've been bringing my friends in, and I keep coming back, and family members bringing their vehicles in. So I'm thinking from like a logical, factual, at least I thought I was. I would like to think it's because they charge reasonable prices and do good work. And he said, well, be perfectly honest, over half of the shops out there do that. And then he kind of dumbfounded me. I was like, why? And he says, everybody is defined on how they handle things when they're going less than perfect. He said, after about a year or two, when we were with you, we had a light come back on or something happened. And like a lot of good shops, you often have a little bit of a backup where, you know, you're scheduling a week or 2 weeks out because you got a demand.
Yeah.
When we heard you, when we were getting towed in, telling people on the phone, new people that wanted to give you new money, that it was going to be a week or however long, you know, they're scheduling for them. But yet ours may have been a warranty that was, you were not making any more money on because it had come back after being serviced. You gave us a priority higher than the new pay customers. He said that meant something right there. Plus, we see so many times in many, especially dealerships, don't want to pick on them, but it is what it is. You know, having looked at so many invoices, doing claims investigations, that they're pretty vague. They're not very descriptive. It doesn't mean you need to write a novel on every invoice, but when you have a diagnostic or do work, you want enough details so that if something else happens in the future, it's easy to tell if it's related or not related, if it's a new problem or if it is a repeat because of either cause a part failure or a technician error. No one's perfect. It can happen. So he said your records are pretty professional and detailed, and that when we had 2 different times when we come back, one of the times you had a part failure. The documentation was good originally. It was good the second time. You owned it, didn't charge us nothing, got us in before the new work. That impressed me. He said another time that was a new problem, and it was a completely different non-related code, but you had the pictures of the code you had, and everything was documented, and you made us feel good either way, that you had an open mind. And you weren't prejudging us or telling us it wasn't covered or not covered, whatever. You told us, he says, it's how you handled it and how you made us feel when things were less than perfect. Wow. He said, that's what defines pretty much anybody. And at that point I said, okay, well, what do I owe you? I know you're the business consultant. And he joked, he said, the first one's free, like a lawyer. But I said, wow, and that's carried with me all these years. That was pretty profound.
That is brilliant. And so true. I mean, really, really true. That is so cool. Just great advice. Well, if you were to give, we're about up on our time here, but if you were to give a shop owner or even a manager some advice as they kind of enter into this new, kind of this new environment that is auto shops and auto repair or diesel repair, whatever it is, and you're trying to figure out, okay, this career pathing thing feels like a pretty big deal. Obviously, seems like it might be a lot of work to go into it. How does somebody get started? Like, what's the first step?
The first thing is for both the technician as well as the owner, everybody involved, you have to make time. You can't. Even if you're, especially if you're shorthanded, which the industry is.
Yes.
It's rare that somebody's fully staffed, whether it be sales, technicians and service, that you have to make time to improve and to train and to mentor, or it's only going to get worse. Right. Because when everybody there gets run in the ground, and they're used up, and you haven't trained yourself to help them, you haven't got a mentor identified with this and identify the personality, because part of the process we're doing is not just train a trainer, but get that mentor actually certified between ATI and AMI as a certified mentor.
Sure.
So that's a clear path to extend their productivity in life, but you got to start. You really need to start that before it's over, before they're end and gone. That way, it's in a routine and second nature. And by experience, just like they didn't become a great master technician overnight either, they're not going to become a great mentor overnight either. and they really need to have that experience on their belt and have it perfected by the time that they're aging out and they can't do all the hard stuff. That way you're QAing and training and leading the young person to do some of the harder stuff, where you're doing some of the ADAS key programming with everything electronic fobs and being a vehicle security professional. A lot of that's doesn't require a lot of back. It requires a lot of mind.
Yes.
And a seasoned skill set, to where you could be doing more of that while you're training your mentor on changing those engines, those transmissions, those batteries, et cetera, et cetera. So you're building them up, you're investing in them, just like they're, again, my favorite saying, why do you spend so much on training? What if they leave? What if they don't and they stay?
It is. This is really, really good stuff, Jim. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the podcast. I learned a lot here. I think this is a fascinating topic. Hopefully we'll be able to get you back on here again to talk into specific pieces of this more in depth, because it does feel like you could spiderweb off of this in about a million different directions.
You just can't be too busy to help yourself.
Yeah.
If they're getting back to what we talked about earlier, definition of insanity. Keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. If you don't make time, you don't train, you're not reinvesting in your own, team, they might not want to stay invested in you for long.
That's good stuff to end on, man. This was a true pleasure. I really envy or look up to what you do in your business, because I think that's the right way to do it. And hopefully our listeners kind of took some good lessons out of this. Appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you, Jay.